Here are the top stories for today, April 6, 2021. Local government units in areas under the enhanced community quarantine brace for aid distribution, which starts tomorrow to cushion the impact of restrictions on the people's livelihood. Ivermectin versus COVID-19? Not so fast, as the palace urges the public to wait for the Food and Drug Administration to act on the application for its compassion use. Ease burden for consumers. The country's inflation eased to 4.5% in March due to lower rate of price increases in food and non-alcoholic beverages. And age is just a number. We tell you more about the centenarian woman who is now among those who have an extra layer of protection against COVID-19. Good day, I am William Theo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. Local government units in the NCR Plus area are gearing up for the distribution of the government's assistance to individuals affected by the Enhanced Community Quarantine or ECQ. This as the majority of LGUs have received funds for the measure. In a Laging Handa briefing, Interior Undersecretary Jonathan Malaya said among local government units that will start the aid distribution tomorrow are the cities of Parañaque and Caloocan. On Thursday, the DILG will also oversee aid distribution in the cities of Manila and Mandaluyong. Citing the guidelines, Malaya also reminded LGUs to post a list of qualified beneficiaries of the aid on their websites first. He has also warned local officials against using the measure for partisan political activities ahead of next year's elections.
Mahigpit pong ipinagbabawal ang paglalagay ng mga pangalan, ng mga initials, or kaya naman picture, o kaya naman logo, or kahit anumang imahe ng ating mga politiko o local officials habang pinapamahagi itong mga ayudang ito from the national government.
Meanwhile, Malacanang said the government might downgrade the current ECQ status in Metro Manila and 4 nearby provinces to modified ECQ. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the shift to a more relaxed quarantine status will depend on whether the government's prevent, detect, isolate, treat, reintegrate strategies have shown significant improvements in lowering daily COVID-19 infections.
Maaari lamang po tayo makapag-shift sa mas mababang quarantine classification katulad ng MECQ kung makikita na po nating mas umaayos na po ang ating health system at meron na po tayong agarang detection at isolation. Ito po ay pangungunahan ng DILG para sa ating mga local governments, DOLE at DTI para sa mga workplaces, at yung ating pong TGMROF or the task group concerning the overseas Filipinos para naman po sa ating mga returning overseas Filipinos.
Presidential spokesperson Secretary Harry Roque clarified that the president did not order the Department of Health to authorize the use of ivermectin as a potential anti-COVID medication. Instead, he said President Duterte is urging the public to await the go signal of the Food and Drug Administration or FDA. The Health Department earlier warned doctors that their licenses may be revoked if they prescribe the use of drugs for human, as it may cause serious harm. Both the DOH and the FDA say ivermectin is only approved for veterinary use, such as preventing heartworm disease and treatment of internal and external parasites in certain animal species.
Ang nangyari is nag-meeting po nung Sabado ang IATF for almost 10 hours. And one of the agenda na na-discuss po yung ivermectin. No? At report po ni Yusek Domingo, yung Director General ng ating FDA, na meron na po nag-apply ngayon for compassionate use ng ivermectin. So, pwede na pong i-process yan ng FDA. Hindi gaya dati na wala pong nag-a-apply. So, antayin na lang po natin ang aksyon ng FDA sa mga naisampan ng aplikasyon for ivermectin.
The government intends to put up more mobile hospitals for COVID-19 patients, while the local government units established a triage system and telemedicine hotlines. Let us know more about the efforts of the government in addressing the healthcare capacity in Metro Manila from Lane Cabagani.
Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the government plans to build mobile tents and ICU facilities of up to 200 beds in areas owned by government-owned and controlled corporation. He also assured that the government continues to build isolation facilities to cater to COVID-19 patients.
Magbubukas din sa linggong ito ang mga sumusunod. Tignan po natin ang mga larawan at videos. Subic Manila Times Colleges na mayroong 300-bed capacity. New Clark City na may additional 165 beds. Eva Macapagal Terminal, Manila na mayroong 200 beds. At Orion, Bataan Port Terminal na mayroong 100 beds.
Health Undersecretary and spokesperson Maria Rosario Vergere Minuel said the government is preventing hospitals from reaching full capacity by slowly transferring mild and asymptomatic patients from tertiary hospitals to lower-level facilities or quarantine facilities. She said health authorities are also ensuring patient transport vehicles are immediately available. For their part, the local government units are setting up telemedicine hotlines with call transfer capacities. LGUs also establish a triage system to exhaust government assets and complement with needed manpower and other logistical needs. Public schools are also being converted to isolation centers while more hospital tents are being set up to attend to COVID-19 patients. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Laid Kabagani.
The government has authorized the Office of the Civil Defense to procure an initial 500,000 rapid antigen test kits to boost testing efforts. Presidential spokesperson Secretary Harry Roque said the rapid antigen test kits must have undergone validation of the Research Institute for Tropical Medicine, or RITM, and or underwent the emergency use listing of the World Health Organization. The OCD may also purchase other antigen test kits which may be approved by the authorities. The antigen test kits will be used in NCR Plus, which is currently under the enhanced community quarantine until Sunday, April 11. Dr. Rabindra Abhiya Singh of the World Health Organization in the country said the surge of COVID-19 cases is attributed to multiple factors and not dependent on the government's pandemic response. In a virtual palace press briefing, Abhiya Singh explained that the Philippines is not the only country that has seen a significant increase in cases in the past 2 weeks, citing the confirmation of 3 variants of concern in the country.
Right now, with the confirmation of 3 variants of concern in the Philippines, plus a variant of interest in the P3 variant, which was first detected in Philippines and Japan, the situation is being fueled probably to some extent by the widespread presence of these variants. So we have to look at it in this context, and that's what I was pointing to early on when I said that the increase we are seeing in the Philippines in the recent 2 weeks is not uniquely only relevant to the Philippines. We are seeing that kind of increase in many countries.
Abhiya Singh also emphasized the need to continue to invest and works towards strengthening the country's preparedness and response capacities on the ground. Violators of health protocols may not be jailed, but rather help in community service instead. Justice Secretary Bernardo Guevara made this recommendation as he advised local government units to enforce their ordinances, which may include community service as penalty for quarantine violations.
During the last IATF meeting, and I informed the IATF that the better legal basis for enforcing itong mga health protocols would be the local ordinances that have been issued by the local government units, because these are very direct to the point, no? Yung statutes like the mandatory reporting of notifiable diseases, meron doong provision on non-cooperation. But, medyo hindi siya shoot, hindi siya talaga very exact to the actual violation. Kaya nga, we are relying more on the ordinances issued by the local government units rather than in nationwide general statute like the RA 11332 or the mandatory reporting.
Still to come, The palace assures the new concession deal with Manila Water will be advantageous to consumers. And the increase in prices of goods last month slightly eases. More on these when the PNA Newsroom continues.
Sa matinding laban natin sa Coronavirus Disease 2019, sugpuin din natin ang pagkalat ng fake news. Huwag magbahagi ng impormasyon na hindi tiyak ang pinagmulan. I-check mabuti ang source ng balita. Kumuha lamang ng impormasyon mula sa mga official channel ng Department of Health. Huwag magpadala sa maling balita, basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito. Pangalagaan ng sarili laban sa Coronavirus Disease 2019. Hanggat maaari, umiwas sa mataong lugar. Iwasang hawakan ang ilong at bibig, maging malinis sa katawan at ugaliin ang wastong paghuhugas ng kamay. Takpan ang ilong at bibig kung uubo o babahing. Umiwas sa mga taong nagpapakita ng sintomas ng coronavirus disease gaya ng lagnat, ubo at sipon. Magsuot ng face mask kung kinakailangan. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
President Rodrigo Duterte is standing by the strong statement made by Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana demanding the immediate departure of the remaining 44 Chinese vessels from the Julian Felipe Reef in the West Philippine Sea. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the president stands by the statement of Lorenzana saying the remaining vessels had no more reason to take shelter there since the weather has cleared. Roque pointed out that the presence of Chinese ships in the area would not lead to war, as Duterte believes that friendly relations between the Philippines and China will result in the peaceful resolution of this impasse.
Hindi po nagbabago ang posisyon ng ating presidente. Ito po yung kanyang nabanggit na salita sa UN General Assembly. Unang-una po, hindi po natin isasakripisyo, hindi natin ipamimigay ang ating national territory at ang ating mga exclusive economic zone. Pangalawa po, naniniwala tayo at pinanindigan natin ang arbitral decision na pabor sa atin. Pangatlo, ireresolba po natin ang hidwaang ito sa pamamagitan po ng mapayapang mga pamamaraan sang-ayon po sa UN Convention on the Law of the Sea.
Meanwhile, the Department of Foreign Affairs strongly denounced the Chinese embassy in Manila for calling unprofessional the statement of Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana on the presence of Chinese ships off the Julian Felipe Reef. The DFA reminded Chinese embassy officials that as guests of the country, they must observe protocols and accord respect to Philippine government officials. It reiterated Lorenzana's demand for China to immediately withdraw its remaining ships in the vicinity of the Julian Felipe Reef and other adjacent features in the Kalayaan Island group in the West Philippine Sea. It also rejected the embassy's assertion that the area is part of China's traditional fishing ground. In our news overseas, India recorded a single-day spike of 103,558 COVID-19 cases on Monday, the highest so far, thus taking the tally to over 12.5 million. With 478 deaths since Sunday morning, the death toll stood at about 165,000. India also reported about 741,000 active cases, while the 11.6 million people have been discharged so far from hospitals after medical treatment. The number of daily active cases has been on the rise over the past few days as another wave of COVID-19 looms large. India launched a nationwide vaccination drive on January 16. So far, 79 million people have been vaccinated across the country. Meanwhile, the federal government has ramped up COVID-19 testing facilities across the country as over nearly 249 million tests have been conducted so far. The Department of Trade and Industry, or DTI, has been tasked to craft the Strategic Investment Priorities Plan, a list of priority industries that will qualify for incentives under the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises, or CREATE Act. Albay Representative Joey Salceda, the principal author of the CREATE law, said the SIPP would determine the qualification and the length of incentives an enterprise will receive. Salceda said he would want resiliency-building innovations in the list, particularly for innovations in food and agricultural manufacturing, financial technology, sanitation, healthcare, and education. He said the SIPP could also be used for pandemic proofing to prepare the country's economy for shocks similar to COVID-19. He noted that the provision that the president can actually grant special incentives to big investments is already in effect. Salceda said he is in touch with the DTI and the Board of Investments to complete the list within the month. Malacanang praised the revised agreement with water concessionaire Manila Water, calling it advantageous to the government and consumers. Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara announced last March 31 that the government's revised agreement with Manila Water has been signed. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the revised agreement will provide better water service to Metro Manila. Among the salient points of the concession deal is the removal of liabilities imposed on the government when fulfilling its regulatory functions. It also recognizes that Manila Water as a public utility, which makes it more accountable to the government and the public. Meanwhile, corporate income tax cannot be charged to the consumer, unlike the previous concession agreement. The new concession deal also removes the foreign currency differential adjustment, which will result in much lower tariff increases. Meanwhile, Roque assured that a new concession deal with Manila Water Services would be taken up next. Moving on to business, growth of remittances by overseas Filipino workers and improvement of external demand are expected to boost the domestic economy's recovery this year. However, Fitch Solutions Country Risk and Industry Research reduced its growth projection for the country this year from 7.6% to 5.8% on the expected hit from the Enhanced Community Quarantine or ECQ. The unit of Fitch Group cited signs of gradual economic activity, such as the 52.5 level of the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index last February. External demand has been improving, partially due to the COVID-19 vaccination program in other countries. Similarly, OFW remittances continue to remain resilient. While the January 2021 inflows declined by 1.7% year-on-year, it is 1.8% higher than the January 2019 pre-pandemic level. The report said implementation of the two-week ECQ will slightly dampen growth prospects given the expected slide in domestic consumption and investment. A sigh of relief for consumers, the rate of increase in prices of goods has slightly eased. The Philippine Statistics Authority reported today that the country's inflation in March has slowed to 4.5%. This is a slight decrease from 4.7% recorded in February. Meanwhile, the average inflation for the first quarter of this year was logged at 4.5%. The PSA says the slowdown in inflation last month was due to the lower rate of price increases in heavily weighted food and non-alcoholic beverages at 5.8% from 6.7% in February. The government has earlier implemented measures to cushion the impact of high prices of food products such as meat. Executive Order 124, which imposes a 60-day price ceiling on some chicken and pork products, will lapse on Thursday, April 8th. Up next, no to deceit, rebel surrenderers in Sultan Kudarat vow never to be duped again by the NPA. And we tell you the story of this centenarian woman who has now an extra layer of protection against COVID-19. The PNA Newsroom returns after these reminders.
Tandaan ang tamang paraan ng paghuhugas at paglilinis ng kamay upang makaiwas sa iba't ibang karamdaman. Basain ng tubig ang mga kamay at sabunin. Unang sabunin ang mga palad at ang likod ng mga kamay. Kuskusin na maigi ang pagitan ng mga daliri at maging ang mga kuko. Isunod ang pagitan ng mga hinlalaki at kuskusin ng paikot ang mga dulo ng mga daliri sa magkabilang palad. Banlawang mabuti ang mga kamay sa malinis na tubig at patuyuin ang mga kamay gamit ang single-use towel o air dryer. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito. Alamin ang mga dapat gawin sa lugar ng trabaho laban sa Coronavirus Disease 2019. Ang mga kumpanya ay dapat magbigay ng face mask sa kanilang mga empleyado. Bukod dito, magbigay kaalaman din patungkol sa COVID-19. Siguraduhin malinis ang kapaligiran. Maglagay ng sabon at hand sanitizer sa mga palikuran. Siguraduhin ligtas at nalutong maigi ang mga pagkain sa kantina. Obserbahan ang kalusugan ng mga empleyado at katrabaho. Kung sakali man na mayroon silang sintomas ng coronavirus disease, gaya ng lagnat, ubot sipon at hirap sa paghinga, ay agad ipasuri sa doktor. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
You're still watching the PNA Newsroom. The San Nicolas Public Market remains closed until further notice as the town reports 51 out of the 57 total number of cases in Ilocos Norte. Chris Mundo gives us today's Provincial Roundup.
The San Nicolas Public Market remains under lockdown as more of its vendors and utility personnel tested positive for COVID-19. The municipal government of San Nicolas said the lockdown and containment of the public market since March 31 shall remain enforced until further notice due to the rising COVID-19 cases in the town. Out of the province's 57 new active cases reported on April 4, San Nicolas logged the highest number with 51 cases. Mayor Alfredo Valdez appealed to all his constituents, particularly those who are affected by the lockdown, to cooperate with the local government and understand the situation. The Paulino J. Garcia Memorial Research and Medical Center in Cabanatuan City, Nueva Ecija, also temporarily closed its outpatient department on Monday. This as patients from parts of Central Luzon and the National Capital Region continue to arrive in Cabanatuan after being referred to by the One Hospital Command Center. The facility has allocated 120 beds to infected individuals. Hospital Director Dr. Hubert Lapus said by temporarily closing their OPD, they hope to contain the possible spread of the virus within their vicinity. Meanwhile, Los Baños, Laguna Mayor Tony Calao has issued an executive order imposing mandatory isolation of people suspected to have COVID-19. Calao authorized the Municipal Health Office to track those who showed symptoms and quickly isolate them for treatment and monitoring. Those who refuse isolation will face charges. Those tested positive for COVID-19 will be asked to be placed under quarantine or else they may be arrested as well. In a Facebook post, the town's total recoveries increased to 824 after reporting 37 new recoveries on Monday. Los Baños has also logged 4 new confirmed COVID-19 cases, bringing the number of active cases to 129. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Chris Mundo.
9 former combatants of the New People's Army operating in Sultan Kudarat vowed never to be duped again by the communist terrorist group. Colonel Eduardo Gubat, commander of the Philippine Army's 603rd Infantry Brigade, said the rebels were convinced to return to the folds of the law following weeks of negotiations. The former rebels were under the NPA West Taguma Front, far south Mindanao region, operating in the mountains of Sultan Kudarat and parts of Maguindanao and Sarangani. They revealed that they were members of the Militia ng Bayan, brainwashed by a certain Edgar Candi. Gubat said they surrendered to clear their names from any involvement in the unlawful activities of the communist terrorists. These surrenderers will be enrolled under the government's Enhanced Comprehensive Local Integration Program, or ECLIP, as they reintegrate into mainstream society. A 101-year-old resident of Barangay Talondos was among the senior citizens who received a shot of AstraZeneca vaccine in Las Piñas City. Tomasa Amurao, also known as Nanay Po, received her first dose last Thursday, April 1. Her pediatrician grandson, Dr. Benjamir Cabrera, said Nanay Po is known for walking up to 3 kilometers around their village and going to church before the pandemic struck. Cabrera said his grandmother was hesitant at first to get vaccinated due to her fear of going out. But now that she got her first dose, Nanay Po hopes to be able to do her usual walking routine again. With the vaccination campaign of the government now rolling, Cabrera is hopeful the elderly will avail of the protection. Cabrera said the pandemic's impacts on the economy will be mitigated if majority of the Filipinos will be vaccinated. Young cancer survivors exhibited and sold a total of 46 paintings at an auction held in Baguio City by an international service organization. The Metro Baguio Lions Club, led by its newly installed president Jaime T, turned over a check as payment for 46 paintings of children with cancer. The auction was held in support of the Helping Hand Healing Heart Ministries Philippines, a foundation that benefits Filipino children in need of medical support. Marisa de la Peña, assistant director of the nonprofit organization, said the proceeds of the auction will go for the children's treatment. De la Peña said, despite the pain being experienced by the sick children, they have a good imagination and creativity, which they are able to show and share through their paintings and drawings. She thanked the buyers of the paintings through the help of Metro Baguio Lions Club and the other Lions Club in the city. The Philippine Red Cross is calling on those who have recovered from COVID-19 to donate their plasma to help those who are still infected. Red Cross Chair and CEO Senator Richard Gordon said they need sufficient supply of convalescent plasma to help those who are confined in hospitals due to the disease. Convalescent plasma therapy lessens the severity or shortens the length of the disease in COVID-19 patients. The PRC has served 686 patients from 88 hospitals from July 13, 2020 to March 25, 2021, dispensing 784 units of plasma. Due to the continuous increase in COVID-19 cases, the PRC is left with just 8 units. Gordon said having more convalescent plasma will help prevent hospitals from being overwhelmed by the rise in cases, since COVID-19 patients will recover in a shorter period of time. Here's another look at today's biggest stories. Local government units in areas under the enhanced community quarantine brace for aid distribution, which starts tomorrow to cushion the impact of restrictions on the people's livelihood. Ivermectin versus COVID-19? Not so fast, as the palace urges the public to wait for the Food and Drug Administration to act on the application for its compassion use. Ease burden for consumers. The country's inflation eased to 4.5% in March due to lower rate of price increases in food and non-alcoholic beverages. And age is just a number. We tell you more about the centenarian woman who is now among those who have an extra layer of protection against COVID-19. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, visit our webpage or head onto the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know from the PNA Newsroom. We tell stories that inspire change. I am William Theo. Good day. Stay safe, everyone.